Evening comes, you start to feel sleepy to the point where you just nod off in front of the television or try to read something, but your eyes keep closing. And you think, now I'll go to bed and sleep. But as soon as the thought comes up that you're going to bed, you immediately think, what if I can't fall asleep? This triggers a certain stress reaction, and just approaching the bed is enough for your sleep to disappear completely. You lie down in bed, your heart is still racing, you feel some kind of inner fear, and now you think it will be a sleepless night and you can't fall asleep. Moreover, for some people, this starts not even when they go to bed, but literally an hour, 2 or 3 before they even plan to go to bed. And they're already afraid because they think the suffering will start. Those fruitless attempts to fall asleep again, which never seem to work out. And in general, everything is terrible, and insomnia has turned life into a nightmare. Today we'll talk about the reflex of fearing not being able to fall asleep. Watch this video until the end, and you'll learn why it develops, what to do to prevent it from developing. And if it has already happened, in general, it's actually quite effective to eliminate it in just a couple of weeks, even if this reflex has formed and lasted for months, years, or maybe even decades. I'm Roman Bozunov, a sleep specialist, professor, and doctor of medical sciences. I've diagnosed and treated sleep disorders for over 30 years. How does the reflex of fearing not being able to fall asleep form? In general, where does it come from? Generally, a healthy person doesn't worry about sleep when going to bed. Instead, they look forward to their favorite bed and falling asleep without any thoughts of suddenly being unable to do so. And the person easily drifts off into the arms of Morpheus. But a person is entirely made up of conditioned reflexes. In fact, the very fact that we adapt to our environment, that we can think, that we can predict, that we can perform certain tasks, all of this consists of certain conditions that we have learned and that we continue to follow. With sleep, unfortunately, these reflexes played a cruel joke. Imagine that something really disrupted your sleep, some kind of stressful situation. Well, I think if you remember, you've had situations like that, for example, before exams, before some important trips, or after stress. In general, I want to say that in 90% of cases, some kind of sleep disturbances are caused by or preceded by stressful situations. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad situation. Well, for example, a trip, a wedding, a birthday. A person can actually lie awake all night and then think, oh my God, what a nightmare. I have a wedding, a birthday, and I didn't sleep all night. That is, in fact, what happens is that the brain gets activated in response to some stressful situation. A person gets nervous and can't fall asleep. But usually, if it's a short-term stress, the person thinks, well, okay, I didn't sleep this night, but of course, I'll catch up on sleep the next night. Generally, they do catch up on sleep the following night. But at some point in a person's life, a prolonged stressful situation arises, which can last for weeks or even months, and sometimes years. This situation can really disrupt sleep every time. Well, simply because it drags on. For example, some drawn-out divorce, a relative's illness, or small children, which also lead to a situation where a mother literally might not get normal sleep for an entire year. So it's really a prolonged stressful situation that makes it harder to fall asleep because the person is nervous. And what does a person do when he goes to bed? He tries to fall asleep if he can't manage to. In general, well, from the point of view of some basic logic, if we keep trying to do something, eventually we'll succeed. In school, they say if you can't write, repeat it many times and you'll eventually learn. In a gymnastics class, if you can't do a somersault, they encourage you to keep trying. With enough practice, you'll eventually succeed. You learn to play the piano and so on and so on. That is, by trying, we develop certain reflexes that eventually allow us to handle the task. Unfortunately, sleep works the opposite way. As soon as we start trying and we start failing, we develop a persistent conditioned reflex, a fear of not falling asleep. It only takes 15, 20, 30 attempts to fall asleep and fail because of a real, ongoing stressful situation. We actually develop a direct reflex, that's what it's called. The Pavlovian model of insomnia development is when even the act of going to bed itself starts to be associated with the thought that I won't fall asleep. Moreover, where a person lies down, when he tries to sleep, he lies in bed. So the bed itself starts to be associated with insomnia. A healthy person, someone who is doing well, he lies down in bed, appreciating his pillow, sheets and mattress, and falls asleep instantly. And what does a person with the fear reflex of not being able to fall asleep think? The bed turns into a sleepless nightmare with a despised pillow, an awful mattress, and unsuitable draft and lighting. And on top of that, the bed partner is a scoundrel, sleeping happily and cheerfully. Yes, that's exactly how my patients describe it to me in vivid detail. And in general, it's a real problem that a person ends up developing a fixed condition reflex. And the next time, when the person is about to go to bed, this reflex starts to kick in even before they actually get into bed. In fact, as soon as the person even thinks about going to bed, the conditioned reflex is triggered and the person can't fall asleep. And after that, it doesn't even matter anymore what caused this stress, or even if the stress itself has long since passed. Despite the divorce being over and the person having moved on with their life, getting married, having children, building a house and planting a tree, their insomnia continues to worsen. Even when kids have grown and sleep well, the mother's sleep may still be disrupted with difficulty falling asleep, midnight waking, and shallow sleep. So these fixed condition reflexes, they become self-sustaining over time. Because every time a person tries, every time it doesn't work out for them, moreover, what's called maladaptive behavior starts to develop. That is, a person goes to bed and it doesn't work out for them. So you need to watch some podcasts, you need to listen, check something on your phone, you need to surf the web. And the person develops another reflex that the bed is not for sleep, but for some other kind of activity, like the television, smartphone, computer, and so on, and so on, and so on. And the person already goes to bed with the intention of doing something there other than sleeping. It's well known that our bed is only for sleep and sex. That's just how it is, excuse me. So then what should we do? First, to prevent the development of this so-called negative reflex. If something has disrupted your sleep, well, let's say it happened once or a few times in a row, you went to bed and couldn't fall asleep. You shouldn't lie in bed for more than 15 minutes without sleeping. It's an absolutely pointless activity. It means your brain is overexcited, it still won't fall asleep, and you'll constantly trigger and reinforce the reflex of fearing not being able to fall asleep. You should get up, go to another room, and do some boring activity. But not your phone, and especially not any kind of surfing. It could be the television, it could be, let's say, reading some calm book, but only the television. Of course, not any political programs, historical novels or something similar. It could be some household chores, cleaning, after all, ironing, if we're talking about women. That is some boring task that you can, when you want to sleep, stop at any moment and go to bed. A person says, but how can that be? I won't get enough sleep. Well, you aren't getting enough sleep anyway. That is whether you lie in bed and try or you just do some boring task. The time it takes to fall asleep will practically be the same either way. Constantly triggering and reinforcing the fear of not falling asleep will accumulate a sleep deficit. I like to tell patients that you are accumulating a sleep elixir, which will then help you fall asleep better. The next rule is that even if you couldn't fall asleep for some time, I don't know, maybe an hour or two, but eventually you did fall asleep, you shouldn't change your wake-up time. Because a person didn't fall asleep for an hour or two, then if he has such an opportunity, he gets up 2 hours later. But what happened? He shifted his time zones, he slept in later, and the next night he'll have even more trouble falling asleep because he slept in longer. And the next point is, try not to change anything the next day because a person starts to develop even more maladaptive behavior. He thinks like this: oh, I slept badly, so I won't go to the gym, I won't go visit anyone, I'll just sit at home and suffer. Rather than staying active and not noticing the lack of sleep, the person sits, suffers, and torments himself. And what's more, he might even take a nap during the day. And if he naps during the day, I don't know, especially for an hour or an hour and a half, he might completely skip the next night's sleep, and accordingly, he'll have even more problems with insomnia. So, the rules are as follows. Don't lie in bed awake for more than 15 minutes. Don't change your wake-up time and spend the next day actively. By the next evening, you'll be more tired but will fall asleep faster and better. If the situation is chronic and lasts for several weeks or months, then that's a different matter. Here you need to implement programs or get rid of the stress that causes this situation altogether. For example, consider changing your job. Think about how you can deal with family problems, financial difficulties, or something else. That is, think about how to get rid of the stress itself. Or you can implement programs of so-called cognitive behavioral therapy for coping with stress. By the way, on the screen you can see our new booklet, which we wrote together with Sofia Cherkasova. Actually, why a booklet? Is it a good book? It's called Deliberate Calm. This is actually a program for coping with stress and anxiety. And it allows you, after some practice, to handle stress more easily, increase your stress resilience, and as a result, experience less stress, have fewer sleep problems, and sleep better. Well, if you manage to deal with stress, then falling asleep will also become less of a problem for you. And what else can be said? If you have already developed a reflex of fearing that you won't fall asleep, a bed insomnia association, negative thinking, and forecasting. So you think that today I'll sleep and tomorrow I'll sleep even worse. Well, that's a negative forecast, yes. If you already have maladaptive behavior, that is, you tried to go to bed earlier, get up later, and started lying in bed longer. You gave up sports, you decided that during the day you would somehow catch up on sleep. So, in fact, you have already developed chronic conditioned reflex insomnia. In this situation, the most effective method of treating such insomnia, after all, these are entrenched conditioned reflexes, negative thinking, and behavior. The most effective treatment for such insomnia is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. We have another wonderful book with Sofia Anatolievna Cherkasova. It's called How to Overcome Insomnia, Healthy Sleep in 6 Weeks. This is probably our combined clinical experience of more than 30 years in fighting such insomnia. And we implement programs for treating chronic, conditionally reflex insomnia using the method of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. In the description for this video, you can find links to the books I mentioned, Deliberate Calm and How to Overcome Insomnia. Say decently. But also to the cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia program itself, which we also use effectively. And within this program, the most effective method for treating the conditioned reflex. The fear of not falling asleep, do you think it is that sleep restriction, or more precisely restriction of time spent in bed? Actually, what is the point if a person is afraid of not falling asleep? Simply, no matter how much we tell him to relax, to breathe, to meditate, still, the person will keep torturing himself with the thought that he won't fall asleep anyway and he won't be able to sleep. But if we reduce the amount of time a person spends in bed to less than their physiological minimum. But usually I ask, how much sleep did you need to feel rested before your insomnia started? For example, a person says 7 hours. I say, okay, that means you are allowed to stay in bed for 6. The person expresses disbelief, saying they can't fall asleep quickly and need 2 hours to try. I respond, but you don't fall asleep during those 2 hours anyway. So you shouldn't be lying in bed for those hours at all. So we limit the time spent in bed so that we consciously create a sleep deficit, and it's enough to accumulate 8, 10, 12, a maximum of 14 hours of deficit, even in total, by missing 1 or 2 hours of sleep per day. By evening, a person develops such pronounced sleepiness that no matter how strong the conditioned negative reflex is, the increasing level of sleepiness at some point overcomes this reflex. And even if a person is thinking, oh, I probably won't fall asleep right now, they'll get to bed, fall into it, and fall asleep. And it's enough to maintain this sleep deficit for about 2, at most 3 weeks, pronounced enough so that the person falls asleep without fear. And literally, in 2 or 3 weeks, a stable, conditioned, positive reflex is formed where a person lies down in bed and falls asleep. In the description for this video, you will also find a link to reviews from patients whom I have treated and used the method of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. Here, they describe how quickly their attitude toward the bed changes from just a terrible hatred of this bed to, oh, my bed, I just want to get to it as soon as possible. And you know, it's interesting, sometimes literally after just a couple of weeks, even with a pronounced sleep deficit, a person sleeps soundly for 6 hours straight. I say, okay, fine, you can add 15 minutes or even half an hour. Doctor, thank you. You really did me a favor by allowing me to lie down for another 15 minutes. That is, the bed turns into a birthplace, a place you just desperately want to reach and sleep in. It's fascinating to observe the rapid psychological changes in a person when they are sleep deprived. And as soon as a person has slept for 2 or 3 weeks without fear, we then gradually start increasing the time spent in bed, maybe up to the usual 7 or 8 hours that a person used to sleep, in order to eliminate the sleep deficit. And in fact, in 2 or 3 weeks, we effectively eliminate the reflex of being afraid of not falling asleep. This is just one component of the full cognitive behavioral therapy program for insomnia. But if, let's say, it's just the elimination of this reflex, as I said, it is resolved quite quickly and effectively with the implementation of the program of time in bed restriction or sleep restriction. You can try to implement it yourself. You can come to us for a consultation, and accordingly, we can implement this program with you. And in general, it's quite fast and effective to eliminate the reflex of fear of falling asleep and bed-related insomnia, and in general to fight insomnia, anxiety, stress and depression using cognitive behavioral therapy methods. Good luck to you, have a great mood, and of course, wonderful falling asleep and sleep.